I was going to ask you about gear because I noticed recently that you switched to the ZCam, ZCam, however you want
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
say it. Firstly, I want to ask why the ZCam, and then as a business owner, how do you make that decision to upgrade? Because every videographer that I know is looking at an Uber camera right now. It's just the done thing. So, why did you choose a ZCam, and then, how did you make that decision as a business?
This is a really, really interesting question. So the Zcam I went to, I've been watching Zcam for probably I've had the camera nearly 9 months. I've been watching them probably nearly 2 years. I can't remember how I stumbled across them. Um, I think I found it on YouTube or something. I was looking at like cinema cameras, and this is when I had the Sony A7S Mark II, and I
Yeah.
think it was the summer of 2019. I was just looking to sort of step it up a bit, and I was going to buy it then. I was going to buy like the E2 back then. Um, it was very, very early days. I think the camera had been out maybe a year, 6 months, and just kept watching, kept watching. Nearly pulled the trigger one time, and then I was learning about it's micro four thirds, and I've got to do this, and was all
Mm.
just a bit confusing, and I never really got around to it. But I was always watching, and they have anyone who is part of it. Zcam have a Facebook group which is like all the CEOs are in it, all the technicians are in it. So if you ever have any questions, like people put
Oh,
stuff in
wow.
there daily, and I must have been in on this group. I think it must be nearly 20,000 now people in it, and I've been in since like the 5,000 days.
Wow.
So I was always watching, and then obviously at 2019 I still had the Sony, and I was going to get it for the summer of 2020. Then of course COVID happened, um, and I was obviously I then moved to London during COVID, and I'd applied for the bounce back loan, and the bounce back loan eventually cleared, and I was like, I'm going to get the Zcam. Like, just use me moving to London as a time to sort of step up. And I actually know it was before it was during I think the first lockdown. They announced the Zcam E2 M4. Now the
Yeah.
M4 is essentially the same as the E2, but was part of their new flagship range. And it
Wow.
basically just didn't have a sync option, but it was £400-500 cheaper. I was like, wait, so I can get a cinema camera that does 4K, no crop, like 120 frames per second, it even goes up to
Oh, wow.
160 frames now. And that's what I really wanted. That was a selling point for the Sony. Like, I wanted to go 4K from 1080, but I still wanted to have my high frame rates because of the. It's just fun having high frame rates. You can.
Yeah, of course.
Slow
Yeah.
motion's been a big part of my sort of content. So yeah, I just saw the Z2 M4 come out. I remember I put a pre-order in. I cancelled the pre-order. So I was like,
Ah,
nah, it's not the right time. And then I moved to London, and I don't buy new gear that often. I really don't. I'm really tight
yeah.
with my money when it comes to
Me
new
neither.
gear. When I say I researched this damn camera, oh my god, I watched every
Like a dossier on it.
comparison. Yeah, well, when it first come out, I was thinking I'll buy it and I'll just become like the YouTube guy for the Z2 camera, like M4.
Yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
that never happened. But even still, there's hardly any videos on it,
No.
and the stuff I was seeing was insane. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to bite the bullet. Um, Bought it off CVP. It come from, and the kicker was I had a few jobs come in that were like big jobs. Was the Maura Higgins and Primark commercial. There was some other. It wasn't music video stuff, but just some bigger projects. And I was like, if I'm going to hire a better camera out anyway, now's the time to
Yeah.
just get the camera. And you know what? If it ain't for me, I'll resell it. It ain't the end of the world. It's so new. The most I'm going to lose is 200-300 quid.
And you would have paid that to hire it anyway, probably.
Exactly, yeah. So did it, but realized how modular the thing is, and you got to build it out. And yes, it takes time, but I think it made me fall back in love with filmmaking. Really,
Yeah.
sort of before that, and with COVID, I just got so fed up, man. I was so lazy with my Sony auto ISO, like the S log, my white balance would sometimes be off, and when now you can't do that with this camera. I mean, you can, but
No.
it's you've got to dial it in. And I think it made me really step up my level and step up my game.
Yeah.
And it's a camera, I still use it on a lot of jobs. Unfortunately, the file sizes are massive, and it absolutely destroys. I've got a good spec PC, and it even destroys that. But it's good, and yeah, it just sort of made me go for it. I'd never really merged to the black magic sort of side of things. I did a little bit of research in it, but it just never. I think I was so fixated on the ZCam because I've seen, and the group, like that Facebook group has saved me so many times, and it's so interesting because you see other people's work and you know
Mm,
what they're getting out of the camera.
yeah,
And
what's
yeah, it's one of
possible?
them things like, you know, you own a camera and I'm still like pushing it. I'm not even pushing it to its limits yet. And yeah, it's cool. And like the whole rig for like under 2 grand, like I'm not
Wow,
even, and yeah, I
didn't
mean
realize
like
it was
this,
that cheap.
yeah, literally, I think did I have it when the Sony A7S was announced? I don't think the Sony, I think I was waiting for the Sony A7S III to see what
So
that,
does
when that,
everyone for like years.
yeah. And then when that price point come in at like nearly 4 grand, I was like, no, I was like, I can buy two Z cams for that. And it's like not necessarily a better quality of image, but it's cinema quality.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I just took the plunge
Oh, nice.
and yeah, it's just one of them.
I
What
saw
was
it on.
the second half of your question? I'm sorry, man.
I was going to say what you kind of covered it in that, like the business decision behind buying a new camera, because like you get, I hate it when people say, "Oh, that's X amount of my day rate," because no, it's not. Like you need to pay
Yeah, it's never
tax.
really
You've
like
got
that.
rates and things like that, and like as you know, it's half the picture. You know, lighting, audio is most of it, but and it is a toy. But I'm surprised you were still filming in like 1080 in 2019. Like, oh, most
Yeah,
people
man.
would moved on to 4K, but I think that shows how good your work was, because it's not really about that, is it? It's, you know, the shot, it's the, you know, the way you tell your story and stuff like that. But yeah, and I was just curious to see, as a business owner, you know, because I want a new camera now. I've got a GH5. It produces like a great image, and I'm still in that phase where I'm trying to max out the best image from the GH5. And until I get to that point, that's when I'll upgrade. And is that the same for you, or is it just, you know, were clients demanding a 4K image? What made you ultimately make that decision?
Yeah, so it was partly the personal decision because I wanted to step into 4K and um, I wanted to just, you know, in general, I felt a lot of people that were at my level within the scene were now starting to move to cinema camera. So part of it was sort of peer pressure and part of it was because I was shooting a lot more like not commercial content, but daytime content. And I was really struggling with S-Log, especially the grading, the skin tones, and just wanted something different. I think when it comes to your business as, you know, an expense, when's the right time? I think always exhaust the cameras as much that you have as much as you can. I mean, this is on a A7S Mark One. You know, I haven't got rid of it because it's a great extra camera to have. The A7S2 I
Yeah,
still have, and there will be jobs there are jobs I have taken the A7S2 on because it is still such a great camera, you know, because
yeah,
the low light is insane, you know, and there's some jobs that are quick fire stuff that don't require the Zcam. The Zcam, I need a good 5-10 minutes to set up at the end, you know, at the beginning and the end.
yeah,
So I think I think people shouldn't get so hung up on gear talk. Like, client ain't got a clue really what you're
no,
shooting on. Like, we had James Matthews is for some may know him, some may not, great
yeah, yeah.
for like videographer, like cinematographer. And he shot on a nifty 50 for years, like big client projects for on like a nifty 50,
And an 18 to 22 as well, wasn't it? Like
like,
variable aperture.
and it's you just yeah, I think people sort of I'm trying to think of it, overestimate like what you actually need, like in order to
Mm,
do the job correctly.
yeah,
And sometimes people maybe focus too much on that rather than actually focusing on the story and the content itself. That's one
yeah,
thing I learned off James. I've learned a lot off James, to be fair. Like, I have a lot of time for him because he he taught me a lot of stuff, you know, that you you know, the story is always the first thing. Story is
mm,
most important. Doesn't matter what you're making. If there's no story to it, it's dead in the water. And I've seen some amazing projects by people and amazing visuals. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but what's the story?
yeah,
Like, what's the point? Like,
yeah,
even with I guess my nightlife videos were a bit different, but I always tried to add a little bit of not necessarily a storyline in, but a progression. So you have like people walking into the venue, big cinematic build up. On the drop, you've got the big drop, you know, with all the wow moments. And then at the end, you've got the slower confetti, like emotional bit. So you're taking them on this sort of journey.
Natural ride,
You know, or I could just go straight in with the boom. And if it was a mixture, it would, you know, it probably wouldn't hit as well. And I think, yeah, that was one thing I picked up. But yeah, going back to the gear, I think there's a lot of peer pressure around, or who's got this gear, who's got that. It's like, it's awesome, but a lot of people are probably buying this stuff and then still shooting in auto. So, you know,
exactly.
and there's nothing wrong with some things in auto. I've used auto ISO a lot. You know, if I'm doing documentary stuff, I will use auto white balance, because 9 times out of 10, it gets it right, or it gets it within the margin that I can change the color grade in post and it's not totally whack or out there. But yeah, I mean, like, people say to me, what camera should I buy? I'm like, oh, I've been looking at this camera that's $3,000. I'm like, why don't you just go buy a secondhand A7S Mark II? That will teach you everything you need to know about it. You've got more than enough frame rates, and then spend some money on some good lenses, like on the Sigma Art lenses. You know, that alone will set you miles ahead. The quality of image is going to be great. You know, I think people like the A7S Mark II is 5 years old now, like it's 5 or 6 years old. It's still a great camera. Like, it's a fantastic camera. Even this, I remember I had my first or second camera was a Canon 500D or 550D, like the T2i, like the typical videographer camera. We all have Magic Lantern on it. When I say I rinsed that, I still have the camera. So it's here. It's this one here. Shit. It's literally this little camera here. That little camera, I pushed to its limit. Like, I'm talking crank the ISO. I was putting like noise stuff on it, but I was still shooting like probably like £300-400 videos on that. Like, I've done some awesome work on that little camera, like nifty 50s, like, you know, and you get the most out of the camera. And I only upgraded to the A7S like the one when like I needed to. And yeah, it's like, you don't like, I tend to upgrade my gear when I feel like I've exhausted the previous camera so much. You know, that I've really run it into the ground. I'm getting the most out of it, and I need that little bit extra.